Good evening and welcome. And tonight in the trial of Jerry Sandusky, the jury has the case. While they have broken for the night, the wait is now officially underway for a verdict. Most of us by now know the allegations that Sandusky abused these kids he was supposed to be helping. Many people heard him discuss the charges in his interview with Bob Costas here on Rock Center. But we have not until tonight heard from one of his accusers. You're about to meet Travis Weaver. He has told his story to a grand jury, though he did not testify in the current trial. And fair warning, as with anything to do with this story, some of these details are highly disturbing. Here now, Kate Snow's conversation with a young man who is, as of this moment, speaking out.
If Jerry Sandusky were sitting right here,
I'd punch him in his mouth.
would you say anything first?
No, there'd be no reason to say anything. He knows what he did. I know what he did.
Travis Weaver says Jerry Sandusky sexually abused him more than 100 times over a period of 4 years, starting in 1992 when he was just 10 years old. He says he thought he was the only boy it happened to until he saw Sandusky on the news, arrested on charges he molested other boys. Weaver, now 30, had never told a soul, but last fall he told his family his story for the first time. He says he still feels numb.
You don't cry about it now?
No,
When's the last time you cried about it?
a long time ago.
Weaver's story echoes many of Sandusky's accusers. Mom and Dad split up when he was little. There was a lot of fighting in the broken home he shared with two brothers. A counselor referred 10-year-old Travis Weaver to a special summer camp run by a charity called the Second Mile.
So what was it like the very first time you met Jerry Sandusky?
It was great. It was like meeting my hero.
Almost immediately, he says, Jerry Sandusky took an interest in him, taking him to football games, inviting him to work out with him at the gym on Penn State's campus. And like many of the young men who testified in court, Weaver says from the beginning, Sandusky expected them to shower together.
Picking me up, trying to give me like bear hugs. He'd wash my hair or my back sometimes.
He says they'd move to a couch in the locker room just beyond the showers.
He'd dry me off with a towel. Say he was trying to wrestle with me, and then he would just have me lay on top of him while we were both still naked.
I know this is really hard stuff to talk about, but what would he do when he had you down on top of him?
He'd rub my backside. Sometimes he'd roll over on top of me and blow on my stomach and rub my genitals. And then it progressed into oral sex.
Did it ever escalate to anything else?
He tried anal sex one time, but it hurt really bad, so I made him stop. That was in the locker rooms.
In the shower?
Yes.
How old were you?
Around 11 or 12.
Weaver says Sandusky rarely spoke during the abuse, other than to say, "You're not going to tell anyone about this."
Do you remember what was racing through your head?
I just couldn't believe what was happening. I was scared.
At the same time, Weaver says Sandusky was inviting him to sleep over at his house.
I stayed at his house probably over 100 times.
100 times?
Yeah, it was over a few years, but yeah, I stayed there a lot.
After Dottie Sandusky cooked dinner for them all, Weaver says he would go down to the basement and wait, knowing that as soon as the rest of the family went to bed, Sandusky would come down.
He'd come down and talk to me and try to play the video game a little bit or play pool or something, and then he'd work his way up to it.
And you'd know that he was going to expect sexual acts?
Yes.
Weaver says when it was over, Jerry Sandusky would leave him and go back upstairs to his wife.
Why do you think his family thought you were there?
I don't know. I never asked.
Did they treat you like one of the family?
The rest of the kids did, but Dottie, she didn't. I don't think she really liked me too much. She was always like distant. She didn't really want to talk to me too much. I always thought she was a mean person just because of how she acted towards me. She never really wanted to talk to me. When she did talk to me, she was just real stern with, with everything I said to her.
Cold?
Cold, yes.
Did she ever walk in on you, see anything inappropriate?
No. No, she didn't.
Do you think she had any idea what was going on, in your opinion?
I can't say for sure, but I mean, how could you not know something was going on?
He didn't always stay in the basement. Sometimes, Weaver says, he was in the second-floor guest room, right across from the Sandusky's bedroom.
Did he ever engage in any sexual acts with you in the guest room across the hall from Dottie Sandusky?
A couple times. A couple times he, performed oral sex on me.
And Mrs. Sandusky was across the hall?
Yes.
When that happened?
Yes.
It's almost an unbelievable story.
Yeah. So I was scared to say anything.
Because you thought no one would believe you?
Yes.
Was this a guy, in your opinion, is this a guy who thought he would never get caught?
Yes. Yes. I don't think the thought ever even crossed his mind.
Jerry Sandusky gave him gifts, took him to fancy dinners, even brought him to the 1995 Rose Bowl, things his own family could never have provided.
He told me he loved me. He told my father he wanted to adopt me.
So Jerry Sandusky said to your father, "I'd like to adopt your son."
Yes.
Weaver's dad, who works at Penn State University's TV station, confirms his son had years of contact with Sandusky and that there was talk of adoption. Finally, at age 14, Travis Weaver says he reached a breaking point. Sandusky took him to Philadelphia for a Second Mile fundraiser, he says, and started wrestling with him in the hotel room.
I told him if he didn't get off me, I was going to call the police on him. And he just laughed at me and forced me to stay on the bed. And told me if I ever said anything that nobody was going to believe me, and he would get my dad fired from Penn State.
So he says he did not call the police, but a couple of weeks later, he did move to Cleveland to live with his mother.
You wanted to get away from Jerry Sandusky.
Yes.
Weaver's life took a downward spiral. He spent time in jail for burglary. 16 years later, Weaver is now working as a roofer in Cleveland. He and his girlfriend, Alicia, have 2 daughters together, ages 2 and 4. He says he's angry at the adults who could have stopped Sandusky. Like former Penn State assistant coach Mike McQueary, he testified he saw Jerry Sandusky with a young boy pinned against the wall of the locker room shower. McQueary says he reported the incident to the university authorities, but never called the local police.
He's a coward for not calling the police, for not stopping Jerry right there. He said he slammed his locker and walked out. Why would you slam your locker and walk out and leave that kid standing there and let that keep happening? You don't just abandon that little helpless kid.
He also blames himself.
If I would have said something and that would have stopped him from being around other kids.
That's a big burden to carry.
I know it's not my fault, but I can't help but feel that way.
Weaver is now suing Sandusky, Second Mile, and Penn State University. His lawyer is Jeff Anderson, who specializes in representing sexual abuse victims, including many cases involving the Catholic Church.
One of the things Jerry Sandusky's attorney has said again and again is that he believes people came forward later in order to cash in.
That's ridiculous. Why would all these kids that never even met each other all have the similar, if not the exact same story about what he did and go on in court and go to trial and testify in front of all these people about all this stuff that happened if it never happened? That's absurd.
What his lawsuit is really about, Weaver says, is finally finding his voice.
You're also speaking out, you've said to me, because you want other kids out there to know that it's okay to speak out.
Yes, it is okay to speak out.
This stuff is really uncomfortable to talk about.
It's extremely uncomfortable. Feels better though once you start talking about it to people, letting everybody know what happened.
People are going to feel for you deeply when they hear your story. They're going to want to know that you're okay now and that you're getting help. Can you be okay?
Yeah. I'll be okay when he's in prison.
Looking in his eyes, Kate Snow, this is so bracing and so far beyond the ken of most of us. Back up to one thing. He did not testify in this current trial where the jury is sequestered. And why is that?
So he came forward after the indictments last fall, after Jerry Sandusky was on the news because he was arrested. He is now part of a second group of guys who came forward later who did testify. He testified before a grand jury. Prosecutors have his testimony. He's willing to testify in court. They're holding that group in case they need them, in case they get a not guilty verdict out of this current jury. They could potentially go after federal charges against Jerry Sandusky using people like Travis.
And after the detail that was broken by NBC News this morning that Sandusky's stepson came forward with his own charges, that's what kept Sandusky off the stand.
Son. Right. Adopted son, Matt Sandusky, was prepared to testify, and we learned today that he was prepared to say that he was a victim of sexual abuse, the adopted son. And you look at the parallels to what Travis just said.
It makes that adoption portion of the interview even more chilling.
It does. I should say we did reach out to Jerry Sandusky's attorney. No comment from Mr. Amendola, and we couldn't reach the attorneys who represent him in the civil suit involving Travis Weaver.
All right, Kate Snow, thank you for your reporting. A final note on that interview that Bob Costas conducted with Jerry Sandusky last November. There was so much there, so much was said over the course of it. We ourselves didn't have the airtime that night to air all of Jerry Sandusky's comments. It is worth a second look for those following this. We have again posted a major portion of it on our website tonight.